Let me at the very outset compliment and congratulate the ICICI Bank for having taken this initiative in digitizing 100 villages. I recollect that on the 60th anniversary of the bank 2 years ago, the Honorable Prime Minister and myself had gone for a function to Mumbai to be a part of those celebrations. And 2 years ago was pre-demonetization, and therefore the extent of debate on digitization in India had not climaxed. At that stage, the ICICI Bank had digitized one village. And with a screen in front of us, the Prime Minister communicated with those villagers. And I'm not so sure that everybody understood the import of the direction in which we were moving. Today, if you start putting all the pieces together of what we've seen in the last few years, it's no longer a jigsaw puzzle. It fits into place. Our financial inclusion program was probably the first major step of the government. And since that financial inclusion program was being undertaken in isolation, so some superficial questions were being raised as to what's the point if millions and millions of people start having accounts with no money in it. Nobody realized the import of what financial inclusion really can do to this country. And suddenly you had the world's largest ever financial inclusion program, literally within a matter of days and weeks, in which the banking industry had played a pivotal role. Then came an emphasis on the unique identity. Earlier, the government had conceived the Aadhaar legislation, which only provided for the procedure by which you get a unique identity number. What do you do with that number? I think it was a learning curve, and therefore it was not clear. And suddenly we brought in the legislation which led to the central and the state governments making sure that a very large number of payments, from subsidies to scholarships to pensions to payments under the Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme, these could all be sent into these accounts which were otherwise not having any balance in it. And suddenly most of these accounts started having a balance. And as we stand now, if you now start putting all the pieces together, you are actually moving towards a situation where one program of the government says that every home in a village should have a toilet. The next program says that every kitchen in a village must have a cooking gas connection. Every village house must have a bank connection, a bank account linked to it. And one of the fascinating features of this country has been that people are extremely flexible in adapting to technologies. There are some who may have a technology blockade in their minds. But that can't really be said of the entire set of emerging generation in this country. And this got proved. And therefore, a lot of what was written about and spoken about, even by men with a credible record, on demonetization, India proved every bit of it to be wrong. So there was no 2% dip in the GDP. There was no disappearance of demand. There was no agrarian crisis. In fact, the agriculture sowing went up. And suddenly you found the whole debate in this country taking a new turn. And I'm personally very glad that some obsolete ideas are clashing with some newer ones. And therefore, out of the debate itself, I have not the least doubt which side of the argument would win. So if somebody would say that electronic machines are terrible and we must go back to paper, we know eventually what the conclusion of this debate is going to be. Or that cash currency is superior to any form of digitization. Or that matter, arbitrary selection of individuals is better than the unique identity. Now, if you see these isolated pieces together, this is a debate which is on, but which side the logic would be weighed in, I have no doubt who eventually would be the winner in this debate, in the argument itself. And I think one great advantage of this whole exercise has been this movement towards digitization. And the movement towards digitization itself has created newer technologies, newer form of electronic modes of payments. So whereas most countries in the world see only essentially credit cards, we see some of them, but we've seen different forms of debit cards and rupee cards and the applications now emerging. The Aadhaar-enabled payment is only unique to us. No other country in the world has that technology or the privilege, where literally your thumb becomes your credit or debit card itself and links it to your bank accounts. And I think this whole exercise itself is going to expand. And therefore, this whole idea of the ICICI Bank that from one village that they selected 2 years ago to 100 villages and this year to 500 villages, and making sure that everyone in that village gets connected. And while I was being taken to these stalls, I was being told by Mrs. Kochhar and her colleagues that real incomes have actually jumped up. We are going to charter into a territory which we have not visualized. Recently, I met the minister from Sweden, a country which is almost a totally digitized economy. And I asked that minister, the honorable lady, that what do you do in your country where somebody offers a cash payment? To which she said, almost nobody does. But if somebody like me went and offered a cash payment to a store, what would you do? They said they will accept cash, but they'll have no change to give it back to you. And therefore, we've squeezed the amount of currency that is available. So per force, the attendant at the payment counter will then go around collecting some cash in order to return the chain to you, and you would say, I'd rather pay by some other mode than cash itself, because that's a very time-consuming exercise. So that's how those economies really have grown into. I don't think we are anywhere close to that, but this is the first step, and certainly not a baby step. These are major steps which have been taken. And I think from salaries to, we had initially convulsions as to how people would adjust to it. How would the tea garden workers be paid? How would factory workers be paid? How would construction labor be paid? How would school children pay their fees? And suddenly, I think after a few weeks, the whole debate itself settled down. And I'm quite sure that this experience, ये जो अनुभव आपने ग्रामीण क्षेत्रों के साथ शुरू किया है, ये अगर अन्य बैंक भी इसको फॉलो करते हैं, इसको उदाहरण बनाकर, तो ग्रामीण क्षेत्रों में भी अपने प्रकार की एक क्रांति इसमें आएगी। क्योंकि जिस दृष्टि से गांव की तरफ हम देखते हैं कि अगर 2018 तक कोई गांव ऐसा ना बचे जिसमें बिजली नहीं होगी, 2019 तक कोई गांव ऐसा ना हो जहां पक्की सड़क उसको जोड़ने वाली नहीं होगी। गांव में मैंने पहले कहा कि हर घर के साथ शौचालय हो, हर घर का बैंक अकाउंट हो, हर रसोई के अंदर कुकिंग गैस हो, तो एक प्रकार से जो आर्थिक गतिविधि देश में हो रही है उसका प्रत्यक्ष लाभ गांव तक पहुंचता है। Till today there has been a debate in the last 26 years as to whether economic reforms have a political cost. This was always a debate in this country, and therefore after 1 or 2 years governments used to hold them back. And I think one of the learning experiences has been that the advantage of that reform didn't reach the villages. And that's the fundamental change taking place today. The advantages of the additional resource available with the state and of the entire economic activity also is reaching the village itself. And therefore, when that segment of the society feels that they've been included in this process, that whole debate that reforms have a political cost itself has disappeared. And that's the change that we are seeing today. But anyway, my compliments to you for having taken this initiative, and I do hope many other banks do emulate this experience. Thank you very much, and congratulations once again.